Hey, everybody. Today I have for you podcast number 45. Today's podcast is titled, The Culture Made Me Do It. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. I'm Dr. Pete Lombardi, and this is my beautiful wife, Sandy Lombardi, who is joining me on the podcast again. Again, a lot of raving reviews for Sandy. She's got some fans out there, and I'm a little jealous. No, just kidding. I'm not jealous at all. Really excited about that. But anyway, I want to take a moment to obviously thank all the listeners that continue to hang in there and listen to our content each and every week. And just the comments that I get, whether it's in the office or out in social settings. We got to run into some friends of ours who we met up with from Florida and listening down in Florida. And they really liked the podcast. So I really appreciate all the positive feedback, and don't feel bad if you don't leave comments. I get it. I mean, not everybody is a big commentator on social media platforms. That's totally fine, but we do like to see those, and also be sure to share with a friend. Sharing is caring, right? And if you want to leave us a review, that also bumps up the algorithm, so gets this on more people's feeds, so to speak. All right, on with the show, right? Here we go. Today's title I came up with just because we were sitting here trying to figure out a title, and it's entitled The Culture Made Me Do It. So anyway, we came up with this topic on a car ride. Last weekend, we were heading out to visit her parents and her brother and his wife. And on the way, we were having a conversation in the car, and Sandy was recently asked to speak to a local group of teens. And the leader of this group, an adult, was noticing that, they meet regularly, that these kids are always showing up with what?
Candy and caffeinated drinks.
And yeah, a lot of sugar. But I mean, that was kind of the topic they wanted you to hit on.
Right.
She wanted you to speak about really the effects of sugar in diets and how excessive amounts of sugar really isn't great for you. And we all like sugar, right? Sugar tastes sweet. And so that could be a difficult challenge for Sandy to be able to talk to these people. But anyway,
I'm laughing because I made Pete reteach me some of the biology behind why sugar is not good for us, and I actually recorded it so I could listen again, because I don't know about some of you, but sometimes my recall is a little slow. So
yeah, well,
a biology lesson in the car ride.
That is a thing. Slow recall could be caused by too much sugar. No,
yes.
So anyway, we just wrote down a bunch of things here today that we see is culturally acceptable to do, and really a lot of it is related to diet, but not all of it. But there's some culturally things that we do culturally that we just kind of, I guess, totally accept it and don't really say much about it because, well, a lot of people do it, and we're all guilty of it ourselves, even at times. So we don't always want to call somebody out on it. But anyway, topic number one is sugar. So what do we want to say about sugar? Or the element number one, I guess. So sugar is obviously something that isn't something you can totally avoid, is it?
No, there's sugar in fruit, and fruit can be a healthy source of sugar in moderation, right? But yes, we're going to have sugar in lots of food categories.
Right. And so what uses the most, sugar is basically turns into glucose. And you mentioned fruit, and fruit is fructose. So what uses a lot of sugar is our brain. Our brain uses the most amount of, by weight, our brain uses the most amount of glucose and oxygen. So that's always good to know. But your brain is really super important. That's why it does a lot of things. Therefore, it has to have energy. And it gets its energy from oxygen and glucose.
I think, Pete, if you could share, one of the most valuable tips is how the cells take up the glucose, and how as children we can perhaps do that for a period of time and not see any outward symptoms. But as we age, we do, there's a long-term effect of that. Like tonight, Grace jumped right on board and wants to help me with this presentation tomorrow. And she's getting like her organic lollipops out and things that we'll allow her to have. And she's like, well, I could teach them about this and how it doesn't have the food coloring. And but she said to me, how come, and I'll use just a fictitious name, Sally, who lives nearby, can eat all the sugar she wants, and she's strong and healthy and fit. And so we had a discussion on that, because what happens over time, right?
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good point. So this is really something I learned from Dr. Giannopoulos, and so I got to give him some credit here. So it really has to, and I mean, I've always understood these principles, but the way he describes it has been really helpful. And we did a full podcast with him, and if you go back into the archives, you will get a full-on dose of Dr. Giannopoulos and him explaining metabolic health. So you can check that out. But anyway, so it goes like this. If you were to take all the blood in the human body and drain it out, you'd have a bucket, of so many liters of blood. And in that amount of blood, you should never have more than a teaspoon of sugar in there at any given time. And your body works really hard to basically take that sugar that you eat in your food and always keep you at that teaspoon amount in your bloodstream. So dropping below is not good for us, and going above is not good for us. They're both really actually quite a toxic experience. So as a kid, if you eat a piece of, say, chocolate cake or a big ice cream sundae, right? So 4th of July, I'm going to have a banana split. That sounds delicious, yummy, awesome. And what happens is all of that sugar goes into our bloodstream, and our body secretes a hormone called insulin, and that insulin unlocks the cells, and that sugar goes into the cells of our body in order to keep the blood at no more than a teaspoon of sugar. So it works really hard to do that. And when you're a kid, your cells are very responsive to insulin. And just imagine one molecule of insulin taking one molecule of glucose and putting it into the cell. And so what happens over time when we abuse that system, and as we get older, our cells tend to be less responsive to the hormone insulin. And so it may take an extra amount of insulin to push that same molecule of glucose into the cell, if that makes sense to you. So that's called insulin resistance. It's extremely common in the adult population, but unfortunately we're seeing it younger and younger and younger because of this overutilization of sugar. So we could
spend an hour just on this one topic, but from a lot of the relationships I have in working with women, so many of their hormonal health issues, I believe, are very much related to the abuse and addiction to sugar over many, many years.
Yeah. And again, something I got to credit Dr. G with explaining is that a lot of women are super concerned about their hormones and they want to have them tested. But the low-hanging fruit, as he would say, is the blood sugar story. Because when you think of hormones, what is the most important hormone in the body? There's only a couple of them that are considered to be paramount. One is insulin. Another one is adrenaline. Okay. So insulin is a primary hormone. It is way more important than our reproductive hormones, the hormones that we use for reproduction. Because if your blood sugar is not handled correctly, then the others are going to suffer. And that's why getting blood sugar under control is the first step for anyone that's having hormonal challenges.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
yeah, is that helpful? So that's sugar. That is the number one thing that I would say that is culturally acceptable to do, and that is to consume lots of sugar, especially for kids. How do we celebrate parties?
Right.
You know, every birthday's got to have what?
Cake and ice cream.
Yeah, exactly. And holidays, you know,
Yeah.
there's always a sugar associated with that, and it's kind of part of the culture. So it's not against the rules to go against the grain. You know, I mean that's to me where freedom really exists, is when you make an informed decision and you just do what you believe to be right. So, all right, what's number 2?
Caffeine.
Caffeine. So what is caffeine? Caffeine is
Stimulant.
it's a stimulant, and it can also be considered a drug, right? So caffeine's a stimulant, and where do we find caffeine? What are some common places we find caffeine?
Coffees, teas. Now they have energy drinks, right?
Yeah, coffee, tea, soda, energy drinks. So if you go to a restaurant, what's a common thing they offer you to have for a beverage?
Soda.
Yeah,
right?
soda.
Yeah.
You know, we have Pepsi products, you know, or we have Coca-Cola products. So yeah. Anyway, caffeine. What does caffeine cause? Well, caffeine causes an increase in your heart rate. It causes an increase in blood pressure. There are some mild benefits to caffeine, but excessive amounts are not good for us. It's rough on our kidneys, and it can also it can be bad for your heart. I mean, if you take enough caffeine, it could kill you, right?
Yeah.
So it is a drug. So it's used oftentimes to kind of pick people up, right? Studying for a test, right? I got to pull an all-nighter. What are we going to drink? Caffeine, right?
And I think we all know this, but more and more younger and younger are consuming caffeine. Like when we were, I don't know, when was the first time you ever had a coffee? Probably chiropractic college, maybe undergrad, but you know, and certainly not when
I actually
you were,
had it in high school. I think I started trying coffee my senior year of high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I've seen some people give coffee to, 11, 12-year-olds thinking, it's just pick one up at Dunkin' Donuts and don't realize that they're causing that craving and addiction for that at a very young age.
Sure. So, and that's the other thing about any type of drug is that when you don't have it, what happens? Well, your brain is actually wired to crave it. So we have this chemical that our brain makes called dopamine, and that gives us a feeling of well-being. And when we think about something, there's a certain release of dopamine, and that is like the initiator to make you want to go get it. And you guys have all had this for whatever cravings you've ever had. That's because there's been a surge of dopamine, and then you go get it, and then say you consume it. And then there is another release of dopamine. And the question is, was that the consumption of that, the reward, was that satisfying enough? Mm-hmm. And oftentimes there's this mismatch with I crave it so much, and then I go get it, and it's just not that good. Mm-hmm. And other times it's exceptional, and that just leads you down this road of wanting it more and more and more.
Right.
So...
well, both sugar and caffeine, both very addictive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So 2 very addictive things. So,
and I would encourage, like, I know I've gotten where I love chai tea latte. You can thank the Blue Line up in Inlet for that. My favorite. I never liked coffee, but now I've tried that and it's just delicious. And I actually looked up the amount of sugar in a chai tea latte, and it was like 28 grams of sugar.
Oh,
yeah.
So that's why you like those.
I think it's good to look at that because you think twice about getting one.
Yeah. I just stick with the black coffee,
Good.
which has caffeine though,
Right.
right? So, but we just try to stick to that one per day so that way we're not getting too much caffeine.
Right.
Okay. So, point number 3 is what?
Alcohol.
Alcohol. Okay. So we all know that alcohol is not good for us. Everybody knows that's also considered a drug, right? But there are times when it's culturally acceptable to have a drink. Yes. You go to, especially in adults, you go to a party of some nature or some event, and there are alcoholic beverages there, and you may choose to have a drink or two or maybe 3 or 4. Who knows? Who knows? Not passing judgment here, but again, it's culturally acceptable. But again, when we swallow this stuff down, what does our innate biology do with it? Well, it has to do something with it, right? It just doesn't go in and go nowhere. It gets absorbed into our bloodstream. Our liver has to do something with it, and it has to detoxify the alcohol. And if you knew anything about chemistry, alcohols end in an OH group. And in order for it to break down, it needs to get another hydrogen. So it takes it from the water in your body. And what ends up happening is that it causes you to go to the bathroom, it causes you to pee, right? And then over time, it actually is a dehydrating process. And if anybody's ever drank too much and wake up the next day and you notice that, wow, your mouth is dry and you're really thirsty, and it's because your body had to detoxify during the night. And so it's a stress on the liver, it's a stress on the kidneys, it's a stress on the brain. So all of these things, they're culturally acceptable, but yet they are a stress on our biology, our own body. So the question is, why do we do them? Yeah.
Are we listening to culture, or are we listening to our innate, and what's going to be feeding and healthy for our body?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of what the whole podcast is about, is like, how can we best support our innate biology? And these are culturally acceptable things, and yet, oftentimes they're not supporting our innate biology. What's point number 4?
Sleep.
Oh, wow. Really? How is sleep bad for us? It's not. It's actually good for us. So
that's the flip side. That's listening to your innate and taking that nap if you're tired rather than the caffeinated drink, right?
Right. And honestly, there's a couple of biohacks out there that are very inexpensive to do that have a huge impact on your health. This is one of them. Sleep. Getting good quality, restful sleep, 8 hours a night, is a biohack in my world, because there's not much that can do more benefit for you than that.
Right.
And the challenge is that culturally, what's acceptable is burning the midnight oil. What's acceptable? Oh, I only need 6 hours of sleep. I'm fine on 6 hours. I know some people that tell me that they only get 4 hours of sleep and they do fine with that. Just because you're surviving doesn't mean your body is thriving. During our sleep, our brain literally detoxifies itself, and it downloads into our memory banks. Our long-term memory will gather data, and then 90% of the information we saw during a day is discarded during sleep, which is amazing. But that's why you forget a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, and wouldn't you say the first 3, sugar, caffeine, and alcohol, all of those will affect our ability to have proper sleep?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. Sugar, caffeine, and alcohol will all disturb your sleep, and it will cause a detriment to the quality of your sleep. Oftentimes people will have a drink, an alcoholic beverage, right before bed because it helps them to fall asleep. But unfortunately, what they're doing is they're taxing their body while they're sleeping. And this is often why, if you have a drink before bed, an alcoholic drink, you will wake up oftentimes more tired because your body's detoxifying during your restful hours. So Sleep is super, super important. And if you could do one thing to improve your health, get better sleep is one of them. Okay. Point number 5. This is totally off the hook, but it's super common.
Pain treatment we picked. I'm going to give a little backstory on that.
Want to give a backstory? I guess because I meet and talk with a lot of people that are suffering from pain, they are constantly reaching for things to take to mitigate their pain, whether it's painkillers, whether it's injections of some sort. But the comment that I hear all the time is, well, I was in a lot of pain. I had to do something. And my question is do we really have to do something? Do we really have to do something? And this goes to a book I'm reading right now, which is called The Comfort Crisis. We as a culture are very, very ingrained in thinking that we have to be comfortable all the time. What is the purpose of pain? Do you know what the purpose of pain is?
It's to alert us that there's something wrong and that we should listen to the pain and maybe stop doing certain action or activity.
There's a novel idea.
Yeah.
It's your body's actually trying to tell you something.
Right.
And we're supposed to listen to our body.
Well, and unfortunately, our son kind of learned this at college, and he's had some back pain from lifting weights with improper form. And when it flares up, he'll grab now some type of anti-inflammatory to take away the pain and discomfort and then just keep going about his day. And that's exactly what he shouldn't be doing because he's just continuing to aggravate the injury because the pain's not there. So.
Now, culturally, there will be people that argue with that point. Why shouldn't he take an anti-inflammatory? Why shouldn't he take an anti-inflammatory if he's in pain? And it allows him to go about his day without pain. Why is that bad?
Well, it's inhibiting the body's own ability to heal. To heal.
Right.
That.
So many people hear about inflammation. There's good inflammation. There's bad inflammation. So inflammation is required for our bodies to repair. You have to have some level of inflammation for repair to take place because your blood has to carry in the cells that are going to clean up damaged tissue, and it's also got to carry in the cells that are going to knit the tissues back together. So that is super important. But we are really big on these anti-inflammatories these days because they work. Mm-hmm. They make you feel better. But it leads to a very poor repair process.
Right.
And then you end up just constantly using them over and over again. So, yeah, not good. Pain serves a purpose. Mm-hmm. And culturally, very acceptable in our culture to treat pain. Yeah. And but here I'm going to be turning 53. I'm not bragging here, making it to 53, but the only pain medication I've ever taken was when I had surgery on my arm and they gave me pain medication. And I think I took 3 of them in the time. I mean, they drilled a hole through the bone in my arm. So, I mean, I made it through it. So it's not like pain is not something that's going to kill you. But again, I'm not saying never take a painkiller, right? So it would be like saying I'm glad that I had it at that moment. It definitely took the edge off, and that was enough. So
we're just suggesting to listen to your body and let your body provide the healing if it can. Right?
Well, it can. Right. It does provide
Well, there's
the healing.
Situations where you needed intervention.
Sure. Yes, exactly. But in most cases, yes, you can. The other purpose of pain is to prevent you from hurting yourself worse. Mm-hmm. And that's oftentimes what I see happen to people is that they do take pain medications or they take, something to try to mitigate pain, and then they go right back to the activity that created the problem in the first place, instead of listening to their body and saying, hey, I'm not going to push it any further. Mm-hmm. But culturally, we want to go to work. We want to maybe continue doing, a workout or something or fighting through something. So we'll just swallow one of these things. And ultimately, we're sabotaging ourselves in the process. Not to mention, when you swallow that down, where does it go?
Liver?
Yeah, it goes to your liver. It goes to where else?
Your bloodstream.
Yeah, it goes to your
everywhere,
bloodstream.
right?
So it goes everywhere throughout your body. And it doesn't have a GPS that goes to just one location where you're having pain.
Right.
It goes everywhere. So think about the chemical toxicity that exists there. So again, culturally, people probably don't like to hear that, right? But from the truth standpoint, this is how your body works, from your innate biology. So anything else you want to hit today?
No, we've kept them on a while today.
Okay, so we carried on for quite a bit, and I hope this was helpful and encouraging. You may not be able to fix all of these things all at once, but just to become more mindful of it, become more aware of it, and just consider why you do what you do.
Yeah.
But that's all we have for this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. Stay tuned each and every week so that you can stay connected and be inspired and keep moving toward your best life by stripping away all of your limitations.
Happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July.